The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jacob Miller pushed his mop across the high school gym floor. His shoulders ached from hours of work, but he kept going just like he always did. The empty basketball court gleamed under the harsh lighting, reflecting his tired face like a mirror. At 48, the late-night janitorial shift wasn't getting any easier, but it helped pay the bills. His phone buzzed in his pocket, making him jump. Who would call at this hour? His heart skipped when he saw it was from Lily's school. The message was brief but sent his mind racing. "Please come to the principal's office first thing tomorrow morning regarding your daughter." Jacob leaned against his mop, his worn work boots squeaking on the wet floor. What could Lily have done? His sweet, quiet girl who always did her homework and never caused trouble. She'd been even more withdrawn since losing her mom 3 years ago. "Please, not bullying," he whispered to the empty gym. The thought of Lily suffering in silence made his chest tight. Or maybe her grades were slipping? He'd been working so many hours lately. Maybe he'd missed something important. He finished his shift in a daze, his mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. The drive home in his old pickup truck was a blur of streetlights and worry. When he finally crawled into bed at 2 a.m., sleep wouldn't come. He stared at the ceiling, remembering how Sarah, his late wife, always knew exactly what to do when it came to Lily. She would have known if something was wrong, would have seen the signs. "I'm trying my best, Sarah," he whispered into the darkness. "I hope it's enough." Morning came too soon. After his early delivery route, Jacob headed straight to the middle school. His work uniform was wrinkled, and he knew he probably smelled like cardboard boxes and cleaning supplies. He hadn't had time to change. The school hallways were quiet, most kids already in their first period classes. His footsteps echoed against the linoleum as he made his way to the principal's office. The secretary gave him a small smile and gestured to the chairs. "Principal Harris will be with you shortly." Jacob sat down, his large frame making the plastic chair creak. His calloused hands fidgeted in his lap. The wall clock ticked loudly, each second stretching like molasses. Around him, the office buzzed with typical morning activity phones ringing, papers shuffling, the copy machine whirring in the background. A class photo of Lily from last year caught his eye on the bulletin board. She was smiling shyly at the camera, her dark hair neatly braided just like Sarah used to do it. The sight made his heart ache. Was he failing her? Should he have found a way to be home more? The door opened, and Principal Harris appeared. She was a tall woman with kind eyes behind practical glasses, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Mr. Miller? Please come in." Jacob's legs felt heavy as he stood. Following Principal Harris into her office, he immediately saw Lily sitting in one of the chairs across from the large desk. His daughter looked so small in the oversized chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, just like he'd been doing moments ago. She glanced up at him quickly before looking back down at her shoes. Principal Harris gestured to the empty chair next to Lily. "Please, have a seat, Mr. Miller." Jacob lowered himself carefully, trying to read the principal's expression. The office was warm and cluttered with books and student artwork. A small fan hummed in the corner, stirring papers on the desk. Through the window behind Principal Harris, he could see the school's playground, empty now except for fallen autumn leaves skittering across the blacktop. "Mr. Miller," Principal Harris began, folding her hands on her desk. "I know you must be worried, being called in like this." Jacob's throat felt dry. He wanted to reach for Lily's hand but wasn't sure if he should. Instead, he gripped the arms of his chair and tried to prepare himself for whatever was coming. "Island." His voice cracked slightly, and he cleared his throat. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" He noticed Lily squirming slightly in her seat, her face flushed. Principal Harris adjusted her glasses, and Jacob's stomach clenched, bracing for bad news. The morning light streaming through the window cast long shadows across the desk between them, and for a moment, the silence in the room felt heavy enough to touch. The wall clock continued its steady ticking, marking each tense second. Jacob could smell the lingering scent of cleaning products on his uniform, making him even more self-conscious. He wished he'd had time to change, to look more like a proper parent instead of someone who'd just finished mopping floors and delivering packages. Principal Harris leaned forward slightly in her chair, her expression unreadable. Jacob felt his pulse quicken, remembering every parent-teacher conference he'd attended alone since Sarah passed, Every time he'd had to explain why he couldn't make it to school events because of work. He straightened his shoulders, trying to prepare himself for whatever was coming. "Mr. Miller," Principal Harris began again, her tone carefully measured. Jacob held his breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Principal Harris folded her hands on the desk, her expression unreadable. Jacob's work boots felt heavy on the office's thin carpet as he shifted in the too small visitor's chair. The ticking of the wall clock seemed to grow louder with each passing second. "Mr. Miller, I called you in because of an incident that occurred in Lily's social studies class yesterday," Principal Harris began. Jacob's heart sank. His gaze dropped to his calloused hands, rough from years of manual labor. He could feel the shame creeping up his neck, warming his ears. Single dads always got judged harder, he knew that all too well. Lily interrupted Mrs. Watson's lesson. Principal Harris continued. She stood up in the middle of class without permission. Jacob glanced at his daughter, sitting so small in her chair. Lily's dark hair fell forward, hiding her face. Her hands were twisted together in her lap, just like her mother's used to do when she was nervous. "I'm sorry," Jacob started, but Lily's quiet voice cut through. "Tommy was being mean to Miguel," she said, looking up. Her eyes shone with unexpected determination. "He kept making fun of his accent and telling him to go back where he came from." Nobody was saying anything, but Miguel looked so hurt. Principal Harris nodded encouragingly. "Go on, Lily. Tell your father what happened next." Lily sat up straighter, her voice growing stronger. "I remembered what Mom always used to tell me about standing up for what's right. So I stood up and told Tommy that being different isn't wrong, it's what makes our world beautiful." Jacob's chest tightened at the mention of his late wife. Even now, 3 years later, the grief could sneak up and squeeze his heart when he least expected it. "Your daughter gave quite the speech," Principal Harris said, a hint of admiration in her tone. "She talked about how her mother taught her that kindness is a choice we make every day." Lily nodded, her eyes meeting Jacob's. "I told them what Mom always said. Always choose love over fear. That being scared of people who are different from us just makes us mean, but choosing love makes us brave." Jacob's shame melted away, replaced by a surge of pride so strong it nearly took his breath away. His quiet little girl, finding her voice to defend someone else, it was exactly what her mother would have done. The other students were very moved, Principal Harris continued. Several teachers who overheard said they had tears in their eyes. Miguel's parents called to express their gratitude, but there was something in the principal's tone that made Jacob's pride falter. "But," he prompted. Principal Harris sighed, adjusting her reading glasses. "But we've also received calls from some parents who felt the disruption was inappropriate. They're concerned about students challenging authority in the classroom." "I didn't mean to be disruptive," Lily said softly. "I just couldn't stay quiet. Mom always said silence helps the bullies win." Jacob reached over and took his daughter's hand. Her small fingers curled into his work-roughened palm, trusting and warm. "You're not in trouble, Lily," Principal Harris assured her. "But I needed to inform your father about the situation. Some parents can be quite vocal about their concerns." Jacob understood the unspoken warning. In their small community, waves could quickly become storms. He'd learned to keep his head down, to avoid drawing attention. But now his daughter had done something brave and true, and he didn't know whether to encourage her courage or protect her from what might come next. "Thank you for letting me know," Jacob said, standing up. His joints creaked from the long night of work. "We appreciate you being understanding about this." Principal Harris stood as well, smoothing her blazer. "Your daughter has a remarkable spirit, Mr. Miller. In my 30 years of education, I've rarely seen such genuine compassion in action." They made their way out of the office, Lily's backpack bouncing slightly as she walked. In the outer office, the secretary, Mrs. Chen, caught Jacob's eye as they passed her desk. "Mr. Miller?" she called softly. When he paused, she glanced around before speaking in a low voice. "I just wanted you to know what your daughter did yesterday. It gave me courage to finally speak up at my church group about some things I've been seeing. Sometimes we all need someone to remind us to be brave." Jacob nodded, emotion thick in his throat. He squeezed Lily's hand as they walked out into the morning sunshine, his mind swirling with pride, worry, and uncertainty about what would come next. Steam rose from the pot of spaghetti as Jacob drained it in the sink. The kitchen was quiet except for the gentle clink of plates and the hum of their ancient refrigerator. He'd splurged on jarred marinara sauce tonight, a small celebration, though his stomach still churned with uncertainty. Lily sat at their small kitchen table, her math homework pushed aside. The overhead light caught the slight tremor in her hands as she twirled pasta onto her fork. "You know," Jacob said, breaking the silence, "what you did yesterday standing up for Miguel like that, it reminded me so much of your mom." His voice caught slightly on the word mom, the way it always did. Lily looked up, her eyes brightening. "Really? Really?" Jacob managed a small smile. She always said doing the right thing wasn't about being loud or getting attention. It was about speaking up when others wouldn't. "Some kids at school are saying I got in trouble," Lily said softly, pushing a meatball around her plate. "But Miguel smiled at me in the hallway today. He never smiled before." Jacob's chest tightened. "Listen, sweetheart. What you did was brave and right. But—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Sometimes people don't like it when others rock the boat, even for good reasons." "Mom would have rocked the boat," Lily said with quiet certainty. Jacob couldn't argue with that. Sarah had always been the brave one, the one who knew exactly what to say. He was just the quiet janitor who kept his head down and worked hard. The next morning, Jacob shuffled through their mail at the kitchen counter. Bills, junk mail, and then his heart stopped. An official letter from the school board. His hands shook as he tore it open. The words blurred before his eyes. Formal hearing. Disciplinary review. Disruption of educational environment. His coffee went cold beside him as he read and reread the letter. Later that afternoon, pushing a cart through the fluorescent-lit aisles of Save Mart, Jacob couldn't shake the weight of that letter from his shoulders. He reached for a loaf of bread, trying to stick to his careful budget. "That's the Miller girl's father," a woman's voice carried from the next aisle. "You know, the one who caused that scene in Mrs. Watson's class." "Well, what do you expect?" Another voice replied. "No mother at home. Father's always working. Children need structure." "Children." Jacob's hand froze on the bread. His face burned. "I heard she gave quite the speech, though," a third voice chimed in. "My daughter said it was beautiful, all about choosing kindness. We need more of that these days." Sounds like defiance dressed up as righteousness to me. That poor man needs to get control of his daughter before she really gets into trouble. The bread crumpled slightly in Jacob's grip. He quickly moved to another aisle, his ears ringing. More whispers followed him through the store, some sympathetic, others critical. Each one felt like a judgment on his parenting, on the life he'd pieced together after Sarah died. That night after Lily had gone to bed, Jacob sat alone in the dim living room. The school board letter lay on the coffee table, official and condemning in the soft lamplight. Sarah's photo smiled at him from the wall her last Christmas, when she was still strong enough to decorate cookies with Lily. "I don't know what to do," he whispered to the empty room. The silence pressed in around him. He was supposed to be both father and mother, provider and protector, strict and nurturing. Most days he felt like he was failing at all of it. He picked up the letter again, its crisp edges now worn from his worried handling. Lily had her mother's heart, her courage. But Sarah had known how to navigate these waters, how to stand firm without making waves, how to fight battles without starting wars. Jacob just cleaned floors and delivered packages and tried his best to keep their little family afloat. The clock ticked past midnight. Jacob sat motionless on the couch, the letter heavy in his hands, drowning in doubt. His daughter had done something brave and true, everything they'd tried to teach her. Yet somehow it had led here, to whispers in grocery stores, to official hearings, to this crushing fear that he was letting her down. The house creaked and settled around him, full of memories of Sarah and the weight of her absence. In the darkness, Jacob felt more alone than ever, a single father trying to raise a daughter with courage he wasn't sure he possessed himself. Jacob woke before his alarm, the weight of the upcoming board meeting pressing on his chest like a physical thing. The kitchen clock read 6:15 a.m. as he shuffled to start the coffee maker. His work uniform from last night's delivery shift still hung on the back of a kitchen chair, a reminder of the life he juggled every day. Through the thin walls, he heard Lily's bedroom door open. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in her nicest blue sweater and dark skirt. Her face was pale, but determined. You're up early, sweetheart, Jacob said, trying to keep his voice steady. Couldn't sleep. Lily's fingers kept touching the delicate silver bracelet on her wrist, Sarah's bracelet. Jacob remembered the day he'd given it to Lily, carefully wrapped in tissue paper on her 12th birthday. The morning light caught the small heart charm, making it gleam. Jacob made toast and eggs, though neither of them ate much. The kitchen radio hummed quietly in the background, playing soft music that did little to ease their nerves. Every few minutes, Lily would adjust the bracelet, as if making sure it was still there. Dad? Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. What if they make me apologize? I don't think I can say I'm sorry for helping Miguel. Jacob set down his coffee mug and reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Then we'll face that together. Your mom always said doing the right thing isn't always the easy thing. They arrived at the school 30 minutes early. The parking lot was already filling up with cars, more than Jacob expected for a simple disciplinary hearing. His stomach tightened when he recognized the Thompson silver SUV parked near the entrance. The board meeting room was normally used for parent-teacher conferences, but today the space felt oppressive. Long tables had been arranged in a U-shape, with chairs for the board members along one side. Jacob and Lily sat at a smaller table facing them, like defendants at a trial. Mrs. Thompson's perfectly styled hair and pressed blazer made Jacob feel even more aware of his worn dress shirt, the nicest one he owned, but showing its age at the collar. Mr. Thompson sat beside her, his face set in stern lines as he shuffled through some papers. Principal Harris entered, followed by the rest of the school board members. The room fell silent except for the scraping of chairs and the soft whir of the heating system. We're here today, Board President Richards began, to address an incident of classroom disruption that occurred last Tuesday. His voice was neutral, but his eyes kept drifting to where the Thompson Saturday. Miss Miller interrupted Mr. Peterson's history class to make an unauthorized speech. Unauthorized speech? Mrs. Thompson's voice cut through the room like a knife. She deliberately undermined the teacher's authority, and I think we need to examine where a 12-year-old got the idea that she could take over a classroom. Jacob felt Lily shrink beside him. Under the table, her hand found his and squeezed tight. If I may, Mr. Thompson added, standing up. This kind of defiant behavior doesn't come from nowhere, perhaps without proper guidance at home. He let the words hang in the air, their meaning clear. Jacob's face burned. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but Lily's soft voice spoke first. I just wanted to help. The words were quiet but clear in the hushed room. Everyone turned to look at her. She was touching her mother's bracelet again, but her voice grew stronger. Miguel was crying. They were saying horrible things about his family. Mom always told me that when we see someone hurting, we have to help. That's all I wanted to do. Jacob watched several board members exchange glances. Mrs. Martinez, who hadn't spoken yet, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Even Principal Harris's stern expression had softened. While the sentiment is admirable, Board President Richards said, though his voice had lost some of its edge, we have procedures in place for reporting bullying. Taking over a classroom is not the appropriate response. With respect, Jacob found himself speaking, drawing strength from Lily's courage. My daughter saw someone in immediate distress and acted with compassion. Isn't that what we want to teach our children? Mrs. Thompson scoffed. What we want to teach is respect for authority and proper channels. Perhaps, Principal Harris interrupted, we should take some time to consider all aspects of this situation. This isn't just about classroom disruption. It's about bullying, intervention, and yes, the appropriate ways to handle such situations. Board President Richards nodded slowly. I agree. This matter requires careful deliberation. We will review all the facts and testimony before making our final decision. He shuffled some papers on his desk. We'll notify you of our decision within the week, Mr. Miller. The scraping of chairs filled the room as people began to stand. Jacob guided Lily toward the door, his hand protective on her shoulder. They had almost reached the exit when he heard voices and saw camera flashes through the windows. Outside, a small group of reporters stood waiting. Microphones appeared in front of them like mushrooms after rain. Mr. Miller, how do you respond to accusations that you're encouraging disruptive behavior? Lily, can you tell us what inspired your speech? Is this a statement about the school's bullying policies? Lily pressed against Jacob's side, trying to hide from the cameras. Her fingers clutched her mother's bracelet so tight her knuckles were white. Jacob felt a surge of protective anger. "No comment," he said firmly, wrapping an arm around Lily's shoulders. He guided her through the crowd of reporters, keeping his body between them and the cameras. Their car seemed miles away, though it was only across the parking lot. As they walked, more questions followed them. "Mr. Miller, as a single father, how do you—" "Lily, will you continue to speak out?" Jacob kept walking, his arm steady around Lily, until they reached their old Honda. Only when they were both inside with the doors locked did he let out a long breath. Lily's hands were shaking as she buckled her seatbelt. "Dad?" Her voice quavered. "I didn't mean for all this to happen." Jacob stared through the windshield at the reporters now gathering around the Thompsons, who seemed eager to give statements. This had grown far beyond a simple school disciplinary matter, and he wasn't sure how to protect his daughter from what was coming. The morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the small brick church, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Jacob Miller sat in his usual spot near the back, his Sunday suit slightly wrinkled from being stored too long in the closet. Beside him, Lily smoothed her floral dress, one of her mother's favorites, and fidgeted with the silver bracelet on her wrist. Pastor Williams stood at the pulpit, his gentle voice carrying through the hushed sanctuary. "Today, we have someone special to speak to our youth gathering." He smiled warmly at Lily. "Would you share your story with us, Lily?" Jacob gave his daughter's hand a gentle squeeze as she hesitated. He watched her take a deep breath, just like her mother used to do before tackling something difficult. Lily walked slowly to the front, her shoes making soft taps against the wooden floor. The youth group sat in the first few rows, along with their parents and regular congregants. Jacob noticed Mr. and Mrs. Thompson in their usual front row seats, their faces unreadable. Lily reached the microphone, which Pastor Williams adjusted for her height. She looked tiny, standing there, but when she began to speak, her voice carried clearly through the church. "Last week at school," she started softly, "I saw something that made my heart hurt. A boy in my class was being teased because of where his family came from." She paused, gathering courage. "My mom, before she went to heaven, she always told me that we have two choices when we see something wrong. We can be scared and look away, or we can choose love." Jacob felt his throat tighten. Those were Sarah's exact words, words she'd repeated often during her battle with cancer. He watched as Lily's shoulders straightened, just like her mother's used to. "I remembered what Mom said about choosing love over fear," Lily continued, her voice growing stronger. "She said that sometimes being kind is hard, but it's always right. That God gives us chances every day to show His love to others." An elderly woman in the third row dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Several parents leaned forward in their seats, caught by the simple wisdom in Lily's words. "When I stood up in class that day, I was scared," Lily admitted. "But I could feel Mom with me, like she was holding my hand, and I knew that even if people got mad at me, doing the right thing was more important than being afraid." Jacob watched in amazement as his quiet daughter, who usually shied away from attention, spoke with such clarity and conviction. She wasn't just reciting words. She was sharing her heart, just like Sarah used to do. "My mom also taught me that faith isn't just about coming to church," Lily said, her eyes scanning the congregation. "It's about living what we believe every single day. When we see someone hurting, we can't just pray for them on Sunday. We need to stand beside them on Monday, too." Several heads nodded in agreement. Even Mrs. Thompson seemed affected, her usual stern expression softening slightly. As Lily finished speaking, the church remained silent for a moment before erupting in gentle applause. Pastor Williams placed a kind hand on her shoulder, beaming with pride. "Thank you, Lily," he said into the microphone. "Your mother's wisdom lives on through you, and today you've taught us all something important about courage and faith." After the service, people gathered in the fellowship hall for coffee and cookies. Jacob watched as several congregants approached Lily, sharing quiet words of appreciation. An older man in a veteran's cap made his way through the crowd toward them. "Miss Lily," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "I've been coming to this church for 30 years, feeling invisible most Sundays." He cleared his throat. "What you said about standing beside people who are hurting, well, that gave me hope. Reminded me there's still good in this world." Lily smiled shyly. "Thank you, sir." Jacob felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't experienced in years. The pride he felt watching his daughter wasn't the anxious, protective kind he'd grown used to. It was pure joy. For the first time since Sarah's passing, the grief that usually shadowed every moment felt lighter, transformed by Lily's courage into something beautiful. As the afternoon sun began to fade, they drove home in comfortable silence. Jacob caught glimpses of Lily in the passenger seat, looking thoughtful as she watched the familiar streets pass by. She seemed both older and younger at the same time, wise beyond her years, yet still his little girl. That evening, after a simple dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches, Sarah's Sunday night specialty, Jacob followed their nighttime routine. He tucked Lily into bed, smoothing her quilt just the way she liked it. The moonlight filtered through her curtains, casting a soft glow on her face. Lily's fingers played with her mother's bracelet as she looked up at him. "Do you think Mom heard me today?" she whispered. Jacob felt tears well up in his eyes, but for once they weren't entirely sad. He sat on the edge of her bed, taking her small hand in his. "I know she did," he replied softly, his voice thick with emotion. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city park where hundreds of folding chairs filled the grassy area in front of a makeshift stage. Jacob Miller gripped the steering wheel of his old pickup truck, knuckles white, as he navigated through the crowded parking lot. His eyes darted to Lily in the passenger seat, who sat quietly reviewing her handwritten notes. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready, sweetheart," Jacob said softly, noticing how she kept tucking her hair behind her ears, a nervous habit she'd inherited from her mother. Lily looked up, her eyes steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. "Mom always said that when your heart is racing, it means you're about to do something important." Jacob's throat tightened at the mention of his late wife. He found a parking spot near the back of the lot and turned off the engine. Through the windshield, they could see the growing crowd. At least 300 people had shown up for the citywide compassion rally. That's a lot of people," Jacob mumbled, his own anxiety rising. "Dad?" Lily touched his arm. "Remember what Mom used to tell us about fear?" Jacob smiled despite himself. "That it's okay to be scared, as long as you don't let it stop you from doing what's right." They made their way through the crowd, receiving encouraging smiles from some attendees who recognized Lily from the newspaper coverage. Pastor Williams waved them over to the side of the stage, where other speakers were gathering. "Lily, you'll be our closing speaker," the pastor said warmly. "Save the best for last." Jacob found a seat in the front row, his heart pounding harder than Lily's probably was. He watched as speaker after speaker shared stories of overcoming prejudice, of building bridges instead of walls. The crowd listened intently, occasionally breaking into supportive applause. Finally, Pastor Williams stepped up to the microphone. "Our last speaker today is someone who reminded our entire community what courage looks like. Please welcome Lily Miller." Lily approached the microphone, looking tiny against the backdrop of the stage. She wore her mother's bracelet and a yellow sundress that caught the late afternoon light. Jacob held his breath. "Hi," she began softly, then cleared her throat. "My name is Lily, and I'm 12 years old. A few weeks ago, I stood up in class because someone was being bullied for being different." She paused, her voice growing stronger. "My mom isn't here anymore. She died of cancer last year, but she taught me something I'll never forget." The crowd fell completely silent. She said that every morning when we wake up, we have a choice. We can choose fear, which builds walls and makes us mean to people who are different. Or we can choose love, which builds bridges and helps us see that we're all just people trying our best. Jacob watched as heads nodded throughout the audience. An elderly woman in the second row wiped her eyes. "When I saw my classmate being hurt by unkind words, I heard my mom's voice in my head. She always said that standing up for others isn't just about being brave. It's about remembering that we're all connected. That someone else's pain should matter to us as much as our own." Lily's voice grew more confident with each word. "I know some people think I was wrong to speak up. But Mom also taught me that doing the right thing isn't always the easy thing. And sometimes the biggest walls we need to break down are the ones in our own hearts." The crowd burst into spontaneous applause. But Lily wasn't finished. "My dad works 2 jobs to take care of me. He's tired a lot, but he never stops showing me what love looks like. And that's what I want to say to everyone here today. We all have the power to choose love over fear, kindness over cruelty, bridges over walls. We just have to be brave enough to make that choice every single day. The audience rose to their feet, applause thundering across the park. Jacob stood too, tears streaming down his face, clapping until his hands hurt. Lily beamed from the stage, and for a moment, Jacob saw her mother's smile in her face so clearly it took his breath away. After the ceremony, as people crowded around to thank Lily, Jacob noticed his daughter looking tired but happy. "Hey kiddo, how about some ice cream? I think you earned it." At the local ice cream parlor, they sat in a corner booth, Lily with her chocolate chip mint and Jacob with his rocky road. For the first time in months, maybe even since losing his wife, Jacob felt real joy bubbling up inside him. "Remember when Mom used to let us have ice cream for dinner sometimes?" Lily giggled, a small spot of green ice cream on her nose. Jacob laughed, really laughed, the sound surprising even himself. She called them backward days. Said sometimes you need to turn things upside down to appreciate them right side up. They shared stories about her mother, laughing at memories that had once been too painful to discuss. The ice cream parlor's fluorescent lights grew brighter as dusk settled outside, and Jacob realized they'd been there for over an hour. "We should head home, sunshine. It's getting late." The drive home was peaceful, with Lily humming softly to the radio. Jacob felt lighter than he had in months, proud of his daughter and, for once, proud of himself too. But as they turned onto their street, the lightness evaporated. Even in the growing darkness, the spray paint was impossible to miss. Harsh red letters defaced the passenger side of their pickup truck, which they'd left parked in the driveway. "Go back where you came from." Jacob's stomach clenched as he pulled up beside the vandalized vehicle. The joy of the afternoon shattered like glass, replaced by a cold, familiar fear. He turned to shield Lily from the sight, but she had already seen it. Her small face, still glowing from her triumph just hours ago, crumpled in confusion and hurt. The morning air was crisp and biting as Jacob Miller worked the scrub brush against his truck's door, his arms aching with each stroke. The harsh chemicals stung his nose as he attacked the spray-painted words that seemed to mock him in the early light. No matter how hard he scrubbed, traces of the hateful message remained like a stubborn shadow. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Mrs. Chen from next door pause during her morning gardening. She stood up slowly, removed her gloves, and walked over with a thermos. "Tea?" she offered quietly, her kind eyes meeting his. Jacob paused, his shirt damp with sweat despite the cool morning, and accepted the warm cup with grateful hands. Across the street, Mr. Peterson watched from his porch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Other neighbors walked by on their morning routines, some averting their eyes, others slowing down to stare. A few pulled out their phones, and Jacob's stomach churned at the thought of more pictures circulating online. Mrs. Chen touched his arm gently. "I have stronger solution in garage, special for removing paint. Let me get it." Before Jacob could protest, she shuffled away, leaving him standing there with the tea warming his calloused hands. Inside the house, he could see Lily watching through the living room window, still in her pajamas. He'd woken her early to tell her she'd be staying home today, and the memory of her face falling made his chest ache. She'd argued, insisted she wasn't afraid. But Jacob couldn't shake the image of that hateful graffiti, and what else people capable of such cruelty might do. Mrs. Chen returned with a bottle of industrial-strength cleaner and a new brush. Together, they worked in silence, the paint gradually fading under their combined efforts. Other neighbors began to approach. The Ramirez family from 2 doors down brought coffee and donuts, and young Tommy from across the street offered his help with the scrubbing. But for every kind gesture, there were the whispers. Jacob caught fragments of conversations from passing dog walkers, bringing it on themselves and should know better. "What do you expect?" By mid-morning, the truck was clean but still bore ghost-like traces of the vandalism. Jacob's shoulders slumped as he thanked his helpers, gathering up the cleaning supplies. Inside, he found Lily at the kitchen table. Homework spread out before her, though her pencil hadn't moved in ages. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked, setting down the cleaning supplies. Lily nodded without looking up. "Are you going to your delivery job today?" "Called in sick," Jacob replied, running a hand through his graying hair. "Thought we could spend the day together. Maybe watch one of those cooking shows you like?" But Lily just shrugged, pushing her textbook away. "I should be at school," Maria texted, Everyone's talking about what happened. I should be there to explain. Lily, Jacob interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. We need to lay low for a while. Let things calm down. The day passed in uncomfortable silence. Jacob tried to keep busy, cleaning the house, paying bills, making calls to insurance about the truck damage. Lily alternated between homework and staring out the window, jumping every time a car drove by too slowly. As evening approached, Jacob heated up leftover casserole from the church potluck. The microwave's hum seemed extra loud in their quiet house. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd celebrated so many happy moments, where Jacob's wife used to help Lily with homework while cooking dinner. I've been thinking, Jacob started, pushing his peas around his plate. Maybe it's better if we step back from all this public speaking for a while. Lily's fork clattered against her plate. What? Just until things settle down, Jacob continued, unable to meet her eyes. People are upset and I'm worried about. You're worried about what other people think. Lily cut in, her voice trembling. Mom always said that's the worst reason to stay quiet. Your mother. Jacob's voice caught. Your mother isn't here to protect you, but she taught me to protect others. Lily pushed her chair back, standing up. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice stayed strong. Mom wouldn't want us to hide. She always said that love has to be brave, especially when it's hard. Jacob felt the words like a physical blow. His wife had indeed said that countless times. She'd lived it too, staying positive and full of love even through her final days of cancer. I'm trying to keep you safe, he whispered. Safe isn't always right, Lily replied, sounding so much like her mother that Jacob had to close his eyes for a moment. The kids at school who get bullied aren't safe. Maria's little brother who gets called names isn't safe. Mom said we have to stand up for people who need help, even when we're scared. Lily, please. Jacob's voice cracked. I can't lose you too. Lily's face softened. She walked around the table and wrapped her arms around her father's shoulders. You won't lose me, Dad. But I can't stop speaking up. Mom wouldn't want that. After a long moment, Jacob patted her hand.
Go on up to bed, sweetheart!
We'll talk more tomorrow. Do way. He listened to her footsteps on the stairs, heard the soft click of her bedroom door. Only then did he let his head fall into his hands, his shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Later, after he'd cleaned up dinner and checked all the locks twice, Jacob sat at the kitchen table with an old photograph. His wife smiled up at him, her arms around a younger Lily, both of them laughing at something long forgotten. The image was slightly worn at the edges from all the times he'd held it, seeking guidance in her frozen smile. I don't know if I can do this, he whispered to the photograph, his finger tracing her face. How do I keep her safe and let her be brave? How do I know what's right? The photograph offered no answers, just that same gentle smile that had always given him strength before. Through the ceiling, he could hear Lily's footsteps as she got ready for bed. The sound echoed in their too quiet house, reminding him of all he stood to lose, all he had to protect. Jacob stared at his wife's photograph, feeling more lost and alone than ever. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the counter where a folded piece of paper caught Jacob's eye. He recognized Lily's neat handwriting immediately. His coffee forgotten, he picked up the note with trembling fingers. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Dad. It's choosing love in spite of it. Jacob sank into a kitchen chair, the words blurring as tears filled his eyes. Sarah's words, his late wife's wisdom, now coming back to him through their daughter. He could almost hear Sarah's gentle voice saying those exact words to Lily years ago, probably during a thunderstorm or before the first day of school. The note crinkled in his grip as memories washed over him. Sarah had always known exactly what to say, how to face life's challenges with grace and strength. Now here was Lily, carrying her mother's torch, showing the same quiet wisdom that had made him fall in love with Sarah all those years ago. He was still sitting there when his phone buzzed. A text from the school board secretary reminded him about the community meeting that evening. His stomach clenched at the thought of facing more angry parents, more accusations. But this time, something felt different. Lily's note, Sarah's words, had awakened something in him. The community center was already half full when Jacob and Lily arrived that evening. They slipped into seats near the back, but whispers followed them like autumn leaves in the wind. Jacob recognized the Thompsons in the front row, their backs rigid with disapproval. Mrs. Peterson, the school board president, called the meeting to order. "We're here to discuss recent events at Lincoln Middle School and their impact on our community," she began, her voice carefully neutral. One by one, parents stood to speak. Mr. Thompson's voice boomed through the room. "We can't allow students to disrupt classes without consequences. What kind of example does that set? This girl needs discipline, not encouragement," Mrs. Thompson added, not even looking in their direction. "And where is the parental guidance?" Each word felt like a physical blow to Jacob. He glanced at Lily, expecting to see her shrinking into herself. Instead, she sat straight-backed, her mother's bracelet glinting on her wrist, her eyes clear and steady. More parents spoke, their words becoming a blur of criticism and fear masked as concern. Jacob felt the familiar weight of inadequacy pressing down on him, but then he felt Lily's small hand slip into his, and something shifted inside him. Before he knew what he was doing, he was on his feet. The room fell silent, dozens of eyes turning toward him. His heart hammered against his ribs, and his palms grew damp. He hadn't spoken in public since Sarah's funeral. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I'm Jacob Miller, Lily's father." The silence in the room grew heavier. He forced himself to continue. Sarah's words now. Lily's words echoing in his mind. "Choose love over fear. 3 years ago, I lost my wife to cancer." His voice grew stronger. "Every day since then, I've worried about failing our daughter. I work 2 jobs. I'm not always there for school events. Sometimes dinner is just pasta again because I'm too tired to cook anything else." He saw several mothers shift uncomfortably in their seats. "But every single day, I see Sarah, my wife, and Lily, not just in her smile or the way she tilts her head, but in her heart. In the way she chooses to stand up for others, even when it's hard, even when she's afraid." Jacob's voice grew thick with emotion. "You see disruption. I see my daughter living out her mother's greatest lesson. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing love in spite of it." He looked directly at the Thompsons. "Lily didn't disrupt your class. She disrupted hate. She disrupted cruelty. And if that's wrong, then maybe we need to rethink what we're teaching our children." His hands were shaking, but he kept going. "I'm not a perfect father. Some days I can barely keep it together. But I am so proud of my daughter. She makes me want to be braver, to be better. She reminds me every day that love is always the right choice. Even when, especially when it's the harder choice." Jacob took a shuddering breath. "So you can punish her if you think that's right, but know that you're punishing her for showing the kind of courage and compassion we should be celebrating in our children." He sat down, his heart racing, feeling both drained and oddly light. The room was completely still, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then, slowly, someone started to clap. Others joined in, the applause spreading through the room like a wave. Lily's hand found his again, squeezing tight. The school board meeting room buzzed with an undercurrent of whispered conversations as Jacob and Lily walked through the heavy wooden doors. Every plastic chair was filled to capacity, with clusters of people standing shoulder to shoulder along the paneled walls. The air felt thick with anticipation and unspoken tension. Jacob's work-worn hands trembled slightly as he guided Lily through the maze of concerned faces to their designated seats in the front row. The familiar calluses on his palms felt rough against Lily's smaller hand. He'd changed into his best shirt, the blue Oxford one Sarah had surprised him with on his birthday years ago, back when money wasn't quite so tight. The fabric was softer now, faded from countless washes, but it still held the faint memory of her choosing it just for him. Jacob tugged at the collar nervously, wishing he'd remembered to press it one more time. Mr. Thompson's stern face watched them from his elevated position at the board table, his jaw set in that familiar line of disapproval. His wife sat rigid as a sentinel beside him, her hands folded precisely in her lap, her lips pressed into a thin line. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead cast unforgiving shadows across the room, making everyone's expressions appear more severe than usual, turning familiar neighbors into strangers. Jacob caught snippets of murmured conversations drifting from behind them, some voices sympathetic and encouraging, others sharp with criticism and judgment. He tried not to listen, but words like disruptive and inappropriate filtered through anyway. making his stomach clench with worry. Principal Harris caught Jacob's eye from her seat near the board members, offering him a subtle nod of encouragement. Her face was kind but cautious, the expression of someone walking a careful line between compassion and protocol. "The final item on tonight's agenda," Board President Chen announced, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversations, "concerns the incident involving Lily Miller and subsequent events." She gestured toward Jacob with a professional but not unkind expression. "Mr. Miller, you've requested to address the board?" Jacob stood slowly, his knees feeling weak and unsteady beneath him. The room fell into an expectant silence so complete he could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit and the distant tick of the wall clock. He glanced down at Lily, who looked up at him with an encouraging smile so much like her mother's that it made his heart ache with loss and swell with love all at once. That same gentle curve of the lips, the same spark of faith in her eyes. "Thank you," he began, his voice rough with emotion and nerves. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the quiet room. 3 years ago, I lost my wife Sarah to cancer. She was the bravest person I've ever known, even at the very end when the pain was so bad she could barely speak." He paused, steadying himself against the wave of memory. "She made me promise to raise Lily with both strength and kindness. Some days, working 2 jobs and coming home exhausted, I wasn't sure I could manage either one." A few parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the plastic creaking under them. Jacob's gaze swept across the room, taking in faces he recognized from the grocery store, from Lily's school events, from their quiet neighborhood streets. Jacob continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "When I got that call to come to the principal's office a few weeks ago, I was terrified I'd failed somehow. I thought maybe Lily was in trouble. Maybe I hadn't been paying enough attention. Maybe working so much had made me miss something important." His voice caught slightly. "Instead, I learned that my daughter had stood up for someone being bullied. She'd found her voice, her mother's voice, really speaking up for what's right with the kind of courage I'd forgotten I could feel." The room remained silent, but Jacob could sense the shift in attention, the way people leaned forward slightly to catch every word. "I've heard people say I'm not raising her right, that she's causing trouble and disrupting the classroom." His eyes found Mr. Thompson's, then swept to include his wife. "But my wife taught us that love isn't trouble. Kindness isn't disruption. Standing up for others when they can't stand up for themselves isn't defiance. It's exactly what we should be teaching our children." Mrs. Thompson dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a crumpled tissue, her usual stern expression beginning to soften around the edges. Her husband's rigid posture seemed to relax just a fraction. "I'm not a perfect father," Jacob admitted, his voice cracking slightly with the weight of his own vulnerability. "I burn dinner sometimes. I work late and miss bedtime stories. I don't always know how to braid her hair the way Sarah did." He paused, swallowing hard. "But I'm trying my best to raise a daughter who makes this world a little better, a little kinder, just like her mother would have wanted. The kind of community I hope we can be, the kind I still believe we are deep down, is one where that's celebrated, not punished." When Jacob finished, the silence in the room felt different, heavier with emotion, lighter with understanding, charged with something that hadn't been there before. Then Lily stood up beside him, her small hand slipping naturally into his larger one, her fingers intertwining with his. "May I say something?" she asked the board quietly but clearly, her voice carrying the same gentle strength her mother had possessed. President Chen nodded, her expression noticeably warmer now. "Of course, dear." Lily stepped forward slightly, still holding her father's hand. She wore her mother's silver bracelet, the one with the tiny heart charm, and the links caught the fluorescent light as she moved, creating small dancing reflections on the wall. "I know some people think I cause trouble," Lily began, her voice steady despite the slight tremor Jacob could feel in her hand. "But when I saw Miguel sitting alone at lunch, crying because some kids were making fun of the way he talks, because they said his English wasn't good enough." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I remembered what my mom always told me about choosing love over fear, about standing up for people who need a friend." She glanced back at Jacob, drawing strength from his encouraging expression. "I don't want to make anyone angry or upset. I don't want to cause problems for my dad or for anyone else. I just want to build bridges, not walls. I want our school to be the kind of place where everyone feels safe and welcomed." The simplicity and sincerity of her words seemed to touch something deep in everyone present. The raw honesty in her young voice, The way she spoke, not with defiance but with hope, seemed to break through the walls of judgment that had filled the room when they'd first entered. Mrs. Thompson was openly crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks as she pressed the tissue to her face. Even Mr. Thompson looked visibly moved, his stern expression replaced by something softer, more human. Around the room, people began to stand, applauding. The sound started quietly, tentatively, then swelled until it filled the space completely, echoing off the walls in waves of approval and support. President Chen raised her hands for quiet, waiting for the applause to fade before speaking. I think I speak for the entire board when I say that no disciplinary action is warranted in this case. She smiled warmly at Lily, her official demeanor giving way to genuine admiration. In fact, we commend your courage and compassion. They're exactly the qualities we hope to foster in our students, and frankly, they're qualities we could all learn from. Relief and joy washed over Jacob's face like sunlight breaking through, storm clouds as he knelt down and hugged Lily close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. The crowd began to disperse gradually, many people stopping to shake their hands, pat Lily's shoulder approvingly, or offer quiet words of support and encouragement. As they headed for the exit, weaving through the dispersing crowd, Mrs. Thompson stepped directly into their path. Jacob tensed slightly, old habits of caution rising automatically, but her face was completely transformed, softer, almost vulnerable, with traces of tears still visible on her cheeks. "Mr. Miller," she said quietly, reaching out to touch his arm with a gentleness he'd never seen from her before. Her voice was thick with emotion. "You've raised her well." "Very well indeed." Jacob's throat tightened with emotion as he nodded his thanks, unable to find words adequate for the moment. He held Lily's hand tightly as they walked toward the door together, their shadows merging and separating in the warm evening light that streamed through the tall windows, painting golden rectangles across the worn carpet beneath their feet. Saturday morning painted their small backyard in soft spring colors. Jacob stood beside the hole they'd dug, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. The young oak tree lay carefully on its side, its roots wrapped in burlap, waiting to find its new home. "Ready?" Jacob asked, smiling at Lily, who was already wearing gardening gloves too big for her hands, Sarah's old ones. "Ready." Lily's eyes sparkled with determination as she grabbed one side of the root ball. Together they lifted the sapling, carefully positioning it in the center of the hole. The morning sun warmed their shoulders as they worked, and Jacob couldn't help but remember how Sarah had loved gardening. She'd always said plants were like people, they just needed love, patience, and strong roots to grow. "Mom would have loved this," Lily said softly, as if reading his thoughts. She scooped up handfuls of rich soil and gently packed it around the tree's base. Jacob nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "She would have been right here with us, probably telling us we're doing it all wrong." They both laughed, and the sound carried across their small yard like music. As they worked, Mrs. Chen from next door appeared at the fence, holding a plate of fresh-baked cookies. "For my favorite neighbors," she called out, her kind face crinkling with a smile. "I saw you working from my kitchen window." Before Jacob could clean his dirty hands to accept the plate, Tony Martinez, the boy Lily had defended, came running up the sidewalk with his mother. "Can we help?" he asked eagerly, already climbing over the low fence. "The more the merrier," Jacob replied, touched by their presence. Soon, their quiet Saturday morning turned into an impromptu gathering. Mr. Roberts from across the street brought over lemonade. Even Mrs. Thompson, who had been one of their strongest critics, stopped by with her husband, carrying garden tools and mulch. "We thought you might need these," she said quietly, her eyes softer than Jacob had ever seen them. "And we wanted to say we're sorry. For everything." Jacob just nodded, accepting both the offering and the apology with grace. He watched as Lily showed Tony how to pack the soil just right, teaching him what she'd learned from her mother's old gardening books. The morning air filled with chatter and laughter. Someone turned on a radio, and the sounds of their neighbors working together merged with the gentle music. Jacob's hands deep in the earth, he felt Sarah's presence more strongly than ever. In the sunshine, in the laughter, in the community coming together. "Dad," Lily called out, her face streaked with dirt but beaming. "Look what I found." She held up a small stone shaped perfectly like a heart. "That's a keeper," Jacob said, remembering how Sarah used to collect heart-shaped things, saying they were little reminders that love was everywhere if you just knew where to look. As the morning wore on, their neighbors gradually said their goodbyes, leaving behind empty cookie plates, half-drunk lemonade glasses, and more importantly, a sense of healing that hung in the air like the fresh scent of turned soil. Finally, it was just Jacob and Lily again, standing back to admire their work. The young oak stood straight and proud, its leaves catching the late morning light. They'd spread mulch in a perfect circle around its base, and Lily had carefully placed her heart-shaped stone at its foot. "We're going to be okay, Dad," Lily whispered, leaning against him. Her words carried such certainty that Jacob felt his eyes well up with tears. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, remembering how tiny she'd once been, marveling at the wisdom she now carried. The wisdom that had changed not just their lives, but their whole community. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in strokes of gold and pink. Their small oak tree cast a long shadow across the yard, a promise of the shade it would one day provide. Jacob looked at his daughter, her face glowing in the warm light, and saw Sarah in her smile, in her strength, in her compassion. "This is just the beginning," Jacob whispered, and held his daughter close as they watched the golden light paint their new tree in shades of hope. Who left the note and what did Sarah plan? Click the next video to find out. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And drop your theories in the comments, we're reading every one. Thank you for being here and sharing this moment with us. It means more than you know. If this story touched you, tell us where you're watching from and what part spoke to your heart. Your reflections help others feel less alone. If you believe in stories about courage, kindness, and second chances, please subscribe, follow, and stay with our little community of hope. Your presence matters, your voice matters, and you matter. May you leave feeling seen, valued, and gently reminded that even the smallest seeds of love can grow into sheltering trees.